Hi, have you heard of MTHFR or methylation? Chances are, if you haven't, that you will. It's becoming a very hot subject these days. Today I'm here with expert and physician Dr. Laurie Marti, where we're going to review the foundation of MTHFR and methylation in a series around this. So today is number one, where we get into, what is it and how does it impact you? Hi, welcome to Sage Health TV. I'm Dr. Angila Jaeggli, and today I'm here with Dr. Laurie Marti, who is a family practice physician and amazing integrative medicine doctor. Today we're going to be talking about a topic I think that has become actually very hot these days. You can find it in a lot of functional medicine sites. You can find it in a lot of, people are getting into it related to optimizing like health and fitness. I just saw something on a fitness site, talking about MTHFR. So MTHFR is what we're going to be talking about today, which is, I'm going to let Dr. Laurie get into the details of this very extensive subject. We can get very deep here, but we're going to try to keep it a little bit on the lighter side, but still give you some amazing information today on, what is MTHFR and what does it mean to you. So, Dr. Marti, you specialize, one of your specialties is looking at genetics and epigenetics, and a big piece of this, a lot of different physicians usually start with MTHFR because it's more readily available in the testing and more people know about this. So I know you and I had talked about in understanding MTHFR, we really need to understand what methylation is. So you want to walk us through that?
Sure.
That topic?
I'd love to. And the process of methylation is a very science-heavy topic. And so what I try to do is try to keep it as simple as possible so that you can understand the process. And to understand the gene itself, MTHFR, you really do have to understand the process by which that methylation occurs and how that gene fits into that process. And once you understand that, you can understand how these other problems arise, which would be familiar to most of the people watching this.
Right.
So the process of methylation, I brought along.
Which I love.
Yes.
I love that you brought chemistry.
Yes, I have toys that I brought here. So yes, and there is chemistry involved here. So the process of methylation involves this group right here, which is called a methyl group. And it's a carbon atom attached with 3 hydrogen atoms. And although this looks very simple, this actually is the key to understanding all of this. So the process of methylation is this methyl group getting added to another compound called a substrate, and that produces a whole new compound with a whole different function. For example, serotonin is a neurotransmitter that most of us are familiar with mental illness and depression. You add a methyl group to it, it becomes melatonin. Now it's used for sleep, and it becomes a hormone.
Excellent example.
So this is something that where you can actually visualize what is going on. So in the process of methylation, these methyl groups have to come from somewhere. And that comes from this, I call it the circle of methylation between 2 compounds, methionine, which is a nutritionally important amino acid and actually essential. You cannot make this in your own body. And another compound called homocystine that we make from methionine. And it's the balance between these 2 compounds that actually is the process of methylation and how we get these methyl groups. And so in that cycle between methionine and homocystine is MTHFR. And that enzyme is what causes this wheel to turn. And it's this balance between these 2 compounds that actually sets the stage for everything that comes after. Right.
So, when I'm talking with a patient about MTHFR, in very basic terms, we're discussing like why is this important to them, to understand what their MTHFR is. And so we talk about, this is a part of your detoxification pathways and your tolerance of many different things. It can be, toxin exposure or, medications or even supplements. It's involved in that process, making of brain neurotransmitters, making of energy in the cells. So it's tied we think of biochemistry,
It's
right?
exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, methylation is a buildup and a breakdown.
Yeah.
So it's two things in one. It is the process of building up and making neurotransmitters, our immune cells, our new DNA.
Right.
But it's also the process of breaking down many compounds in our body. So in our liver, for example, we actually add methyl groups to hormones like estrogen so that we can eliminate these things from our body, and including toxins. So when we're exposed to different chemicals in our environment or metals, what happens is we add this methyl group to these toxins so our body can safely eliminate them. So it's really two things all in one. And actually the differences between the subtypes of the gene mutations actually makes the different clinical manifestations based upon what they're affecting.
Right, right. And I do see that tied many times. Not always. You know, you have somebody who, and we're going to get into this, has a particular subtype related to cardiovascular risk, and you look at their family history and you go, oh, I can see that, you know,
Absolutely.
makes sense, you know, or the other related more to anxiety, depression. So I don't know. Is this a good time to get into the individual types?
Well, yes. So, you know, the MTHFR as a gene, it does depend on ethnicity. So we do look at ethnic backgrounds, and family history is also very important. But when we're looking at the two most clinically relevant subtypes of MTHFR, we look at 677 and we also look at 1298. These are the two most recognized. They're the ones that are tested when we do a blood test for MTHFR. And ethnicity does change the types of variants and the commonalities that we see there. So, for example, the MTHFR 677 variant, that's probably the most common in the population. Up to 45% of the ethnic, white, European, North American ethnic background can have at least one different mutation.
Right.
And what that means is that you inherit genes from both your mom and your dad, and you either inherit a good functioning copy of this gene, or you inherit a bad one and that doesn't work properly. So when you inherit one bad copy, you're called heterozygous, and that's in up to 45% of the population. That has certain implications in that it decreases the functionality of that gene about 30%. So you have about 70% functionality. If you have two bad copies, you lose about 70% of the function of 677. Now, if you're talking about the other gene, 1298, we don't really know how much function you lose, but we do know that you lose the ability to, or the reduced ability to make BH4, which is called biopterin, and that can affect different types of clinical mutations that are clinical conditions that are associated with decreased biopterin. Now, as we look at the two different subtypes, the amount of homocystine and methylfolate, the natural folate that we have in our system, that's different between these two variants. So as we look at the 677 subtype, we see lower methylfolate levels. And this is actually an important concept. So MTHFR actually converts folic acid, which is a synthetic type of B vitamin, into functional folate. And it's that process of conversion that makes that methionine homocysteine cycle work. So if a person is eating folic acid, which is found in a lot of different food products, processed foods,
as well as like a lot of cheaper supplements will put only folic acid
absolutely.
and not folate because it's a little cheaper for them. Right.
And what that does is it binds to our cells stronger than natural folate. So if you have a dysfunctional MTHFR gene mutation, but you're also consuming folic acid, what's going to happen is you are going to see further consequences and clinical conditions arise from that. And it seems that the 677 subtype of MTHFR does happen to have lower levels of this natural folate, whereas the 1298 may not see that as much, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, still having
you still have to watch out for the folic acid content of
and still, I think what I see clinically, although we know there's so many contributors to somebody having any particular, like say if they feel anxiety or depression, you know, there are many things that can play into that. Although I feel like somebody has an A1298C, you know, that it does tend to correlate many times with the feelings that they're having. So, you know, they get some benefit also from the treatment as well.
Yes. So in that process of adding, when you see someone with these variants where they have these gene mutations and you're giving them the methylfolate supplement, they will actively make more of these methylation products, so neurotransmitters, immune cells. And in that process, you're going to enhance their moods because you're getting more neurotransmitters into the body. Although that does have some consequences if you get too much of the compounds that are being produced. And that just takes someone who's familiar with how this methylation process works, the conditions to watch for as side effects, and then you can deal with those, you know, various aspects of it.
And I think this is another really important point, that it seems really simple. You think somebody knows, they learn about it through 23andMe, and they go, oh, I have a single or a double copy, and I'm going to treat it with methylfolate. And really, actually, you really need somebody guiding you, because it is not that simple. And many people, because the body is complicated and the body has many different needs for different nutrients to make these pathways move, it's best to work with a practitioner that understands these pathways and then also looks at your individual, you know, deficiencies that could be, you know, from poor diet or maybe even from other genetic mutations. And all of that is relevant, you know, so yeah. So again, I really just want to push the point. It's that this seems simple. Like maybe you could just reach for some methylfolate. Oh God, I'm going to make some more brain energy and I'm going to detox.
Definitely not that simple.
No. And many times you're going to get yourself into trouble in that way because it's changing things, and there are other needs that are going to go up based on how you're pushing those pathways.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a very good point. I mean, and that's, I mentioned this the last time we met, where I had a patient who, you know, had a double mutation, which means they inherited two bad copies from each.
Or homozygous. Like
homozygous, yes. And came to see me, and I put them on the methylfolate.
And they were C677T or A1298T?
C677T.
Okay, yeah.
And then they started developing pain. And I could not understand what was going on until, you know, you do further testing and you find out that someone has some heavy metals in their system. And these are toxins that when you start increasing them in the body, and the body may not be ready for that detoxification process, they're going to feel worse. And then they're going to think, oh, these vitamins are bad for me.
Right.
When in actually, they did need that, but they may have needed detoxification first. And so seeing someone who knows what they're doing with this is very important, because then they can order the further testing that would be, you know, associated with some of these gene mutations and clinical conditions. For example, the 1298 mutation, MTHFR mutation, it can be associated with more metal toxicity. So when you see someone that does have the 1298 gene, you would want to encourage them to do heavy metal testing, because they're going to have more consequences from having high levels of aluminum or mercury in their system than maybe someone with the 677, although they can still have problems as well. But it because of the fact that metals actually interact with your neurological system a little bit more. And that is more common with the 1298 subtype. So you have to not only know, and, you know, from family history, have a suspicion that someone may have an MTHFR mutation, but also knowing the two subtypes and knowing what further testing may be necessary to do based upon, you know, maybe how they initially respond to the supplements that you give, or, you know, looking at some of their other, family history and seeing if maybe they might benefit from more preventative measures to see if they have some of these other things in their system, even if they don't know they're there.
Right, right. And, coming back to, and nothing is ever like, oh, you have this, so you must have this. It doesn't work that way. But when we're looking at the C677T or just the 677, what it can be associated with is increased cardiovascular risk.
Absolutely.
And so, and I know a lot of docs will look at homocysteine as a marker for that, although that is not, we want to go a little deeper than that. And homocysteine all alone, many times it's a great marker, and we want to watch that homocysteine. And actually, we have a little talk out there on homocysteine and all the benefits of checking your homocysteine.
Right.
But this gets a little, more, and I'd like to, for you to speak of, there's definitely an optimal level of homocysteine. Whether it's, you don't want it too high, and you don't want it too low either. Right.
So this is something that I want to clarify because it's really important. So cardiovascular problems can arise from both subtypes.
Yes.
Okay, 677 and 1298, but they're a little different. So we see more clotting risk with the 677 subtype, which would be more your heart attacks, your strokes. That can be more associated with clotting. Versus the 1298 that affects more nitric oxide. So that's a topic all in itself, and I'll leave that for...
We'll come back.
We'll come back for that one. But nitric oxide levels are influenced by 1298, and that influences the blood vessels themselves. So the ability of them
Opening
to dilate.
Blood flow.
Exactly. So we're talking about hypertension and heart failure and
erectile dysfunction.
Yeah. So you're talking about a little bit of a different process, but still associated with cardiovascular disease. So both of those. But homocysteine definitely plays more of a consequence with the 677 subtype. So we tend to see higher levels of homocysteine with the 677 subtype, which we don't often see with the 1298 subtype. We don't
doesn't
see
mean it doesn't need to be treated.
You still want to check it, but it often isn't elevated in those particular patients. But when you do see a high homocysteine level, and what I mean by high is out of the normal range, you do want to lower that. And usually that is accomplished through supplementation with your B vitamins that affect this MTHFR, which primarily are methylfolate, the active type of B9, and B12. So as you do that, then you can monitor the homocysteine level in the blood, and you can see if it's coming down. And if it's not, there's a reason. And so sometimes it's not as simple as just those particular B vitamins. There's some other things you're going to need to look at, which you can, in someone that knows what they're doing, they know what to look at. And then with the 1298 subtype, again, you want to try to keep that homocysteine level around, I usually pick about 7.5, because most normal ranges go up to about 15. But it does depend on the lab you're going to. So I try to shoot for, even if the lab has a smaller reference range for what is abnormally high, usually 7.5 is still a good number to achieve.
We're looking, that's an optimal number.
That's an optimal number. And that means that you are in balance. Methionine and homocysteine are in balance, and this cycle of methylation is in balance. And that's usually a good indicator of where you've achieved the right amount of the treatments. Right.
As we were talking about earlier, which I thought was really fascinating, because it brings us to another piece of something that we on our show, we've talked about glutathione, which is an incredible antioxidant and so important for heavy metal detoxification, and I mean, support of the brain and the lungs and the it just goes on and on. So if the homocysteine is too low, that's when we get it. That also could be an issue.
Absolutely. So that is a very, very important concept here. So when you go on some of these supplements, sometimes the homocysteine is lowered too much. And then it gets too low. And there's a consequence for that, because homocysteine is the substrate or molecule that leads to our most important antioxidant in our body, called glutathione. Glutathione is what helps you detoxify chemicals in the body. It helps keep the cells healthy, keeps cancer cells, from developing.
Recycles other
antioxidants. So it's an incredibly important compound. So if you lower homocysteine, you're going to lower the ability of the body to make its own glutathione. And this is incredibly important. So that's why monitoring that homocysteine level can help you know that even though, I mean, even if you're not checking glutathione levels, which by the way, you can check.
You can check those, yes.
Absolutely. But even if you're not checking those, homocystine can give you a rough idea of if you're keeping that probably in normal range as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So coming back to one, like tell me how someone tests usually for MTHFR, the different ways. Like how can somebody do that?
So the easiest way to do it is through a blood test, which you can order through your doctor's office.
Right.
And most doctors know how to test for MTHFR in the blood. You get those results back in about 2 weeks. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. You can also do one of the home saliva genetic testing kits, such as Ancestry.com and 23andMe. They both offer saliva genetic testing kits. Typically, these days, I'm ordering more of the Ancestry. It's a little less expensive, and it does give you a more variety of genes to look at. So that's my personal recommendation. And then there's other specialized labs that will order it as well, but those are the most common ways to test it.
And then we talked about a little bit, I know this can turn into a huge subject.
Yeah, of course.
But, so we're looking at MTHFR. Most people, at least by the time they find us, they have a more significant health history or conditions or things that they're working on, you know. When is it necessary to move beyond the MTHFR and look further? So, you know, there's more things than just MTHFR that are related to this methylation process even. Well,
I think the most common reason somebody would want to look further is if they're having side effects to the treatment. So even, and my recommendation is always go low, go slow, you know.
And we were talking about, like, many times, like, I feel... I see this a lot, you know, I treat this a lot, and really get amazing effects. And one thing we didn't talk about, I see energy rise significantly. But here's the difference, like I do not just focus on folate, you know. We're looking at, you know, checking all the other antioxidants. We're looking at, you know, if I don't know anything else besides MTHFR, at least measuring, you know, other areas and using low dose. So most people using low dose, and I think
so. Low dose really does minimize the amount of potential side effects that can come up. So, in the event that you don't know some of those other genes that are present, you can just assume that you may have some of those. And so, if you start with a lower dose, then you're more likely, if you do get those side effects, they're going to be not as severe. And then you're going to know, okay, I've got to look at some other things, whether that involves testing the other genes. So that's where, if you do those home saliva kits, you can get the full, you know, testing genes that are available. And then, you know, testing for things like heavy metals or exposures based upon, you know, if someone is being exposed to chemicals in the environment, such as pesticides.
If they work in like manufacturing.
Exactly. If they have some obvious, you know, lifestyle factors like that makes it more prevalent that you would want to do further testing. But sometimes it's just because people look at their family history and they see so many problems, you know, cancers and things like this that may not arise till they're a bit older, but they may want to know if there's an idea, you know, get some idea that they might be able to prevent some of these things, you know, when they're younger. So even if you're responding well to the supplements initially, doing some of the other testing can give you a better idea of your future risks of you know, things that might be present in your family history. Right,
exactly. Again, because this all is tying into your ability, you know, your capacity maybe is a better word, you know, to be able to move things, you know.
Absolutely.
In an efficient, healthy way. You know.
And what I was going to bring up, you know, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but, you know, in the process when you're, you know, wanting to test for MTHFR, just remember there's a lot of other things in your life that can affect this methylation process. So it's not just your genetics, it's also your lifestyle. So the kind of foods you eat, and we also know that there's a lot of, you know, common chemicals in our soil, in our water supplies, in the air. All of these things affect methylation beyond your genetics. And if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not exercising, if you take certain medications, most people don't realize taking antacids, taking oral contraceptives,
and
you know,
that
taking statin
necessary,
therapy that you're taking for high cholesterol. All of these these things can disrupt methylation. And that's what, you know, people need to know is
You're talking
that
about high-dose niacin for,
absolutely,
amazing treatment for cholesterol.
Yes,
but
people take high-dose niacin. That actually gobbles up these methyl groups. And then what ends up happening is you end up decreasing the methylation, so you're not getting all the benefits from the methylation with the neurotransmitter. So then people are getting depressed and getting anxious and you know, maybe more fatigue and more pain. So so we have to know what common things in our environment and the things that we're taking that do affect this methylation beyond our genetics. And then when you compound genetics on top of it, it's all cumulative.
Yes.
So then you're talking about, you know, higher risks.
Right. So we were talking, I know we've, you know, mentioned a couple of supplements people use. Usually in this situation, I really encourage people to see a practitioner that is, you know, well informed about MTHFR and these different pathways. But, you know, we were discussing things that people can do at home, or, you know, things that they can manipulate, like eating dark leafy greens.
Absolutely.
You know, if that's that natural folate. Reducing stress, and I know we talked a little bit about that. Ways that maybe, you know, people could look at reducing their stress. Which,
absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about, you know, reducing stress in your life, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. Some people do, you know, meditation. Some people do deep breathing. You know, and you know, we were talking about, you know, how we're going to see the future of using different technologies, you know, helping people with this process. And, you know, so again, attending to your genes, you know, working on detoxification, eating right, and then doing things to manage your stress that, you know, and like we were talking about, virtual reality is going to become a major technology that is being utilized to help people reduce stress, and that's something that certainly we can talk about more in the future.
Yes,
but yeah, there's a lot of different
I'll give
ways.
Dr. Marti a little plug here that this is an area that she's going to be working in extensively, related stress reduction with meditation and virtual reality. So we expect to hear more from you on that part in the future.
Absolutely. Well, the more that our society becomes more advanced and we're using more technology, we can actually use technology to benefit us as well. That helps us to relax, whereas that technology can actually make us more stressed. And again, the more that you can do to make a healthy balance of this methylation in your body, you know, it benefits everyone, even those that may not have the genetic mutations.
Right, absolutely. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for so long about MTHFR. It's such an important subject. And so thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach Dr. Marti at lauriemartimd.com. And Laurie is
LAURIEMARTI.
Oh, there you go, md.com. And you can reach us at sagemediclinic.com. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.